Good evening, everyone. Uh, so, again, thank you for joining today evening talk. And I would like to start evening with a short uh, motivations um, before we start the talk. Okay. So make yourself comfortable. And as you inhale and exhale, naturally, try to observe it mindfully and be aware of that. Simply just observing and being aware with the breath. And then we can try to think, reflect, contemplate when our mind is overwhelmed by negative emotions such as anger, hatred, resentment, ill will feelings, and so forth. in that moment, how our mind become very disturbed, agitated. No peace at all. It completely destroys our peaceful mind in that moment, our inner joy and happiness. On the other hand, when we are able to develop, feel true love and compassion, when someone is not nice, when someone is even cruel, mean, how we are able to keep our mind undisturbed, peace, calm. Therefore, it is quite clear if we want to find more peace, inner peace, calmness, joy, happiness, we need to reduce and overcome those negative emotions such as anger, hatred, resentment, grudges, ill will feeling, so forth. By cultivating true love, compassion, which help us to cool down restless, disturbed mind, which help us to bring peace from this agitation mind. And to find inner peace, calmness, joy and happiness, even at difficult time with difficult peoples and difficult situations. Therefore, I must make more effort to work with with my own mind to reduce those disturbing negative emotions by generating and improving the positive state of mind, such as true love, compassion. And to do that, I need to reflect, contemplate, meditate, practice correctly, continuously. And to practice and meditate continuously, need to be reminded all the time. Therefore, I'm going to listen to the talk and engage into discussions. And we'll try to integrate as much as possible in my everyday life. Okay, then we'll do the refuge and bodhicitta. Everybody into the page number 1. Sangye chedan soki chonam la chanchu padu date kya so che dagi shinsen gibe sonam ki dola penje sangye dupa sho sangye chedan soki chonam la chanchu padu dane kya so che dagi shinsen gibe sonam ki Dola penje sangye duba sho sangye chedan soge chonam la chanchu pado dane kyapsu che dagi jin soge be sonam dola penje sangye duba sho. So today's talk is unlocking our own compassion within to live happy life. So today we talk about locking and unlocking. Locking and unlocking. Right way is locking, anti-clockwise and unlocking. So yeah, today we talk about the importance of cultivating compassion. You know, how cultivating compassion is key to peace and happiness in our own personal life. Is a key for happiness in our families, within our family. Is a key for peace in the world. and and compassion is also the key route to achieve our highest potential, the fully awakened state, the ultimate happiness. So first of all, and also compassion is, the very much rooted, fundamentally rooted in Buddha's teaching and practice. All the Buddha's teachings and practice very much rooted in the compassions. If we try to kind of, condense and summarize, we can see Buddha's teaching practice mainly into traditions, Mahayana tradition, Theravada traditions, and both teachings are very much, or practice are very much rooted in compassions. In the Mahayana teaching, Bodhisattva's practice teachings, a lot of practice, and encouragement and advice, instruction to help and benefit sentient beings as much as possible in different ways. It's about how to help and benefit sentient beings. That is the Bodhisattva's attitude. That is the Bodhisattva practice. Helping and benefiting sentient beings. And learning different skills, different means, internal skills, realization skills to be more benefit and help to sentient beings. So that is very much rooted in compassion. In Theravadan traditions, on fundamental level, the fundamental foundation practice, which both Mahayana and Theravadan, is trying to avoid any action that harms other sentient beings. Is engaged in practice, what we call ethical or moral discipline, the practice of moral ethical discipline, that is, avoiding 10 unwholesome actions, in engaging in 10 wholesome actions. That is the very foundations for both, and that practice is based on compassion. Why we try to avoid engage in such actions is because such actions harms others directly, indirectly. And because it hurts and harms others directly, indirectly, so one is encouraged to avoid that, restrain and refrain from such harmful and hurtful actions, physically, verbally, mentally. Therefore, the practice is, all the Buddha's teaching and practice is very much rooted in that, coming from that compassion. So then, the importance of that. In relation to that, so yeah. So the very foundation practice for both Mahayana and Theravada is trying to avoid and restrain from any harmful actions. And in Mahayana, on top of that, not only you try to avoid harming others, you try to help and benefit others. On the foundation of that, not only you try to avoid that hurts and harm others by avoiding such harmful actions, but one should try to not only avoid harming, but try to be helpful, beneficial, try to help and benefit, you know. And so that is the all the Buddha's teaching and practice, you know, is kind of contains in that. So that is why it's very much rooted in those rooted in compassions, you know, in that all teachings and practice are very rooted in that. Mm. First, what is compassions? What is compassions? You know, so Buddhists in the Mahayana teaching, compassion described as a mental state, you know, mental factors, one of the mental factors, you know, that wish the others to be free from sufferings. And not only wish the others to be free from sufferings, you know, to actually make a firm commitment to help to free from the sufferings. That is how that kind of mind is described as a compassions. So we have to distinguish between attachments and the compassions. Attachment is very much rooted in ignorance, very much rooted in, you know, um, self-grasping, you know. Based on that self-grasping, then, you know, anything that we feel that is helping that self, that help that self, either has been helpful, supportive in the past, or is helpful and supportive now, or could be helpful and supportive in the future. Based on that, then, you know, attachment is very much rooted in that. So there is a lot of expectations in such attachments. Grasping, expectation, conditional. Compassion that is rooted in attachment or mixed with attachment is very unreliable because it is conditional. As long as you are nice to me, I feel compassion for you. When you are not nice to me, then why should I care about you? You know, whether you suffer or not. Why should I care about that? You, whether you are suffering or not. That's the attitude. You know, that kind of compassion that is very much mixed with the attachment, or that coming from the attachment is like that. Whereas true compassions that the Buddha encouraged us to develop, cultivate, and that is the root, the true compassion, that is the root of the happiness, true happiness, inner happiness for others and oneself is unconditional. There's no expectation, there's no conditions. irrespective of whether you have been nice to me or you have been not nice to me, whether you have been kind to me, whether you have been unkind to me, whether you have helped me or whether you have not helped me, doesn't matter. As long as the other being is suffering, you feel for them. As long as the other sentient being is suffering, you feel for them because you feel their pain, their sufferings. Irrespective of what relationship you have, irrespective of how they have been treating you or not treating you, irrespective of how they might treat you or not treat you, your feeling, compassion, feeling for that person always remains. It doesn't change. That is the true compassion. The difference is that. So we should be able to distinguish the difference between the attachments and compassion. Sometimes we could get mixed up. Sometimes it is easy to get mixed up. Mm. And also the compassion that we are the Buddha encouraged us to cultivate, and the compassion that is, the root of true happiness. That kind of compassion, is not only emotional, but it is very much rooted in firm commitment and wisdom. The emotional compassions are not necessarily rooted in wisdom, not necessarily rooted in firm commitments. You feel someone suffering now, you feel compassion, and you try to help, and that person responds in a different way, and you get upset. Do you get it? That is emotional compassions. So your wish to help change immediately, and you feel very sometimes resentful, sometimes angry. I'm trying to help you, and then you respond in that way. How ungrateful you are. We feel you are not grateful, ungrateful, or unworthy of compassions, unworthy of my help. So all those different feelings could arise, things could arise. Instead, then we start to feel negative about that person. No more compassion, it's gone. That is more emotional compassion. That is not a compassion that one developed through training the mind, through practice, that is rooted in wisdom and firm commitments, And so the compassions, that Buddha advise us to cultivate is not that kind of just emotional compassions. Those emotional compassions, even without training, we have, isn't it? Those kind of moments we had, even before you met the Dharma. That kind of feeling sometimes, even animal can express that sometimes. You can see animals, Mm. So that is another thing that we have to distinguish a little bit, to really understand what really that compassion is that we are trying to cultivate and develop through training, through meditation practice, you know. And even within that compassion, there can be kind of different level, you know, even true compassions, you know, but still it's, you can have unconditional true compassions, you know, that is rooted in firm commitment, rooted in wisdom, understandings, even is rooted in that compassion, but still the compassion can be biased in a sense. You have compassion for some, but you cannot feel compassion for bigger numbers. And as you train and you expand that same feelings to more and more sentient beings, you expand to countless sentient beings, numberless sentient beings, become immeasurable compassions. Because the object of your compassion is numberless, countless sentient beings. Also, the result for such compassions is, you know, immeasurable, you know. But also, it doesn't necessarily include each and every sentient beings. It's just numberless sentient, countless sentient beings. But when you expand that same practice, meditation, compassions, to all sentient beings, without excluding any sentient beings, and making that strong, firm commitment to, you know, free them from the suffering and cause suffering by yourself, then that becomes what we call great compassions. So even on that compassion, then again, you know, how we, the practitioners, how they progress, you know, gradually as they train the mind and to expand that true compassion to more and more sentient beings, and then finally to be able to feel for each and every sentient beings equally. And that is what we call great compassion, which is the very root of the altruistic intention, the bodhicitta mind. You know, and such compassions, from a spiritual point of view, you know, is as one of the great Indian master, Chandrakirti, he said, you know, I pay homage to the great compassions, which is very important in our spiritual life or spiritual practice. Very important, play a role at the very beginning, important at the very beginning, very important in the middle, and very important in the end. And he give example, you know. Mm. At the very beginning is like a seed that give rise to the plant of, you know, flower, vegetable, fruit, whatever. You know, in the middle is very important. So that is very important at the very beginning of for the plant, the seed. In the middle is very important, is like the waters, the moisture and fertilizers that help the plant to grow, continue to grow, maintain. At the end, it's like the fruit. Once it has grown, and then the fruit, result the fruit, and that you can enjoy it. Same way, the compassion play very important at the very beginning of your path to, like the seed, to enter the Mahayana path, the Bodhisattva path. It's the beginning of that. Whether someone is true Mahayanis or not Mahayanis is whether you have great compassion, then you become Mahayanis, true Mahayanis. If you don't have great compassion and you are not true Mahayanis, of course you might be interested in Mahayana path, you might have inclination in Mahayana path, you might be trying to practice the Mahayana path, but in terms of really, then whether you have great compassion or not, And so great compassion is the very beginning of the Mahayana path, the Bodhisattva path. So it's very important at the very beginning. Is that lead to that, like the seed. In the middle is very important, as one progress in Mahayana path, Bodhisattva path, and engage in a practice such as 6 paramita, 10 paramita, and so forth. And sometimes when you are trying to practice those practices, when you're trying to be helpful, beneficial to others through practice of generosity, moral discipline, and so forth, sometimes you encounter challenging peoples. Not everyone might be so appreciative of your kindness, compassion, due to different reasons. And so when you meet such difficult peoples, sometimes you might just give up, say, I'm done. I try my best to help, now I'm done. You give up. You give up your path. There's a danger of giving up the path. Then you might think, it's easy to be selfish. Instead of being compassionate and kind and trying to help, maybe it's better and easy to be selfish and better to be selfish and, not have any concern for others. So sometimes when you face such challenges, obstacles in such way, one might give up the Bodhisattva path and Mahayana path. But if you have true compassion, great compassion, the compassion is like that moisture, the water that continue to give that plant to grow, that keep you on the path. Because of your compassion, you will not give up. Because of your compassion, you will not give up when you face such obstacles, such difficult, challenging peoples. You will not give up your path. You will not give up your practice. And what keep you continue to be on the path is because of your compassion. If you wasn't compassion, you would have given up when you encounter such difficult peoples and so forth. So that is why in the middle is so important that compassion help us to continue in the path, even difficult times, even when, when not everyone is very kind and helpful and appreciative and grateful, for you to trying to be helpful, beneficial, and so on. At the end is very important. Just like at the end, the plant grow and the fruits ripen and you can enjoy. At the end is the compassion when you achieve enlightenment. That enlightenment continue to help and benefit sentient beings. And the sentient being experiencing the fruit of that enlightenment. And everyone getting benefit from that enlightenment. When you achieve fully awakened state, fully enlightened state, from that, the fruit that everyone enjoy, experience from that, is because of the compassions. If it wasn't for the compassions, then one can be bliss out in your own, bliss out in your own cessation and your own blissful state. like arhat. For the arhat can be in those states for long time, sometimes even eons, you know. But the fully enlightened Buddha are never in that. They continue to help, benefit, and it is, and therefore everyone, yourself, all sentient beings, to experience the fruit, the benefit from that enlightenment. And that is because of the compassions. So at the end, it played the role like the ripening of the fruit that is being enjoyed by yourself. So that is very how it is explained, and it's true, is that compassion. And even in our everyday life, that is what really help is the compassions, you know. What really bring peace is the compassions. As I mentioned at the very beginning of the motivations, a lot of time in our everyday life, you know, we become restless, you know, we lose our peaceful mind, calm mind. And when we lose that peaceful, calm mind, in that moment, there is no more, not only there's no more peace, but there's no more enjoyment, happiness in that moment, you know. And when does that happen? When you're very angry, upset, you know. When you are very angry, upset, strong resentments and so forth. In that moment, it's very clear, with our own experience, we are not talking about some kind of out there. We are talking about our own experience. If you observe, if you see or feel what in that state, when you are in those state, there's no calm peacefulness. It's like the boiling of the water. Your mind is very disturbed, agitated. There's no calm, there's no peaceful. And when your mind is such restless, disturbed, agitated, and no calmness, peacefulness, then there is also no enjoyment. There's no pleasure in that moment. You cannot experience that. On the other hand, when you, instead of anger, resentment, and upset, when you are able to develop compassions, true compassions, the true compassion is the opposite of anger, hatred. Before, instead of feeling anger to someone and you are upset with someone, you have strong resentment with someone, instead, if you are able to feel compassion for that person, instead of anger, instead of being upset with that person, you feel compassion. If you are able to do that, then all the mind that was restless, agitating mind become calm, peaceful. There's no more restless mind towards that person. There's no more agitating mind. And you can experience calm, peaceful mind. Through that calm, peaceful mind, and when your mind is that kind of calm, peaceful, you are able to experience more pleasure, more joy, more happiness. And it's not only you who is experiencing that, and also that kind of effect your emotional well-being, your physical well-being. When you are very angry, upset, resentful, and agitated, then your mind is not in peaceful mind. Your emotion is not a calm, peaceful state. In that state, when you are in that state, your mind cannot concentrate well. When we are upset and angry, we cannot concentrate. Your mind cannot concentrate. You cannot make good decisions, the right decisions. As a human beings, one of the advantage we have over the animals is able to reason, reasoning. Animals are more intuitive, Sometimes their intuitive is probably more better than ours. In terms of senses, their senses are very, very strong. Some of them can hear very far away, we cannot hear. Some of them can see very far away, we cannot see. Some of them can smell very far away, we cannot smell. Some of them can taste something we cannot taste so clearly. So in terms of senses, many of them are better than us. But what makes humans advantage over animal is this, our ability to reason, using reasonings. That is what it is. But when you are so angry and upset in that moment, you cannot reason. You lose that ability. We lose our best, our best tools, you can say. That's our best tool. And you lose your best tool, your intelligence, your ability to make right decisions, your ability to reason and all of that. On the other hand, when you develop, instead of anger, when you are able to develop compassion for that person, instead of anger, if you are able to develop compassion, and because your mind is calm, peaceful with that compassion, unagitated, unupset, then you can concentrate better, you are able to concentrate better, you are able to use your reasoning better, and so forth. And then also on physical well-being, same. When you are angry, your blood pressure go up. If you have sugar, it goes up. Sugar levels go up. Someone who has diabetes, their sugar level go up. Someone who has blood pressure, their blood pressure level go up. Is something that people who have had that, they can notice immediately how it changes. But when your mind is calm, peaceful, you can bring down, which has been increased by your mental state because of, agitated mind, by anger and so forth. And also when you are so angry and upset, also you are more likely to have heart-related illness, such as stroke and so forth. And again, medically, there have been also some, findings. You are more likely, it increases the chances of those illness and such increases. On the other hand, when you're compassionate, it brings down that of anger, hatred, resentment, grudges, all those feelings. And so therefore it also helps your physical well-being as well. And it is not only about you, it also helps your families. It's clear if one member of the family is upset and angry, not only it affects the person, the energy is felt by the rest of the families, the friends, everyone around them. Even their anger is not directed toward them. Even the family member know they are upset and angry with something, not towards them, but that energy is not a good energy, unpleasant energy. You know, when someone's angry, even if it's not directed at them, everyone feel, almost, you know, uncomfortable. It makes everyone uncomfortable. It makes everyone uncomfortable. It makes people not safe, insecure, unsafe. Because when someone is angry, things can happen very quickly, Small things can trigger them, Someone's very upset, and then, you pull the door, not being too mindful, a little bit too harsh, and that could trigger that person to lose the mind. Small things can trigger. And because of that, then it makes the people around them uncomfortable, And that is how, on the other hand, when someone is calm, peaceful, because of kindness, because of the compassion, when they are so calm and peaceful, not only it affects them, it affects the whole people around them, whether it's animal, whether it's people, family, friends, colleagues. Even someone's mind is a little bit kind of, agitated, and when they are close to that person who is so calm, so peaceful, they feel that effect, calming effect, and they feel very calming as well. So that is how one can be helpful, sometimes even without doing anything. When someone is so kind and compassionate, just being themselves and someone being around them has that energy of making calm, bringing calm energy. And therefore, that is how it brings peace, and calmness in your life, in the help to bring calm and peacefulness around people around you. Your own families, friends, colleagues. That is why cultivating true love, compassion is so important, so important. And I was also, I used to think, and now I notice I'm being a naive, At a certain time, long time, I used to think if people are more educated with modern educations, the world would be a better place. Because people have more education, people are more aware things, everyone can read, everyone can, that's so they are more informed about the everything, so it will be a better place. But to my disappointment and for my naivety, that isn't the case. The education's level has gone very high all over the world. Modern educations, talking about people who went to schools, college, degrees. But has the world become a better place? I doubt. I doubt. More crime than it used to be. Sometimes it feels like people are getting being less helpful to each others, more self-centered, more selfish. Inequality getting bigger and bigger. Poor becoming more and more poor, richer getting incredibly more and more richer, and still not enough, and still, you know, and a lot of those are very educated people. And then now I realize that modern education is not enough. As His Holiness Dalai Lama always mentions and emphasizes, what he called, um, sometimes he calls social value, or, um, sometimes he calls secular ethics. But it's basically about the need to give educations on loving kindness, compassion, tolerance, forgiveness, all of those qualities, which is not taught in the modern education schoolings, you know, not as a religious, but as a secular, and it's becoming more and more clear why that is so important. Until we have those education, until people practice those, I can't imagine the world being a better place, you know. And that also shows so importance of, in order to see better, more peaceful world, more kind world, the need to cultivate loving kindness, compassion in each of us. Everyone has that responsibility. World peace doesn't just come by shouting, protesting, and shouting and play out. When individually everyone started to work with their mind and they become more, more patience, more tolerance, more forgiving, more kind, more compassion, when everyone's become that, then the world will be a better place, more kind place, more compassion place, more peace, more harmony. Until then, you know, it's hard. We go through cycles of different governments or different systems. Still, every system has failed. Every systems have not solved the issue that was there before. Capitalism, socialism, communism, all countries who run different systems, but they all have more or less same problems. Same problems. Because the human beings have not changed their mind. There's no change in their mind. There's no change in their transformations. If they don't, reduce their greediness, attachments, the anger, selfish attitude, all of them, no matter what system you bring, still it becomes same, more or less. But when, when human beings, when they change their mind through practice, then there is hope. Then there is hope. And that is where, you know, um, as some of the great, master says, in order to bring the positive change, we have to start with ourselves. You want others to be kind, but you don't want to be kind. You want others to be generous, but you don't want to be the generous. That is how we, at the moment, we want everyone's, they should be generous, but not necessarily me, you know. And we want everyone forgiving, but not necessarily me, We want everyone to be kind and compassionate, not necessarily me. And with that kind of attitude, with that kind of path, it's not going to. If you want the world to be more compassionate, you have to start being compassionate yourself. Start from yourself. If you want to see the world more generous, you have to start from yourself by being more generous yourself. If you want to see the world more forgiving, more understanding, you have to start for yourself by being more forgiving, more understanding. Isn't it? We expect everyone else to be that, but not me, And we have all the excuse why not me, We have all the excuse why I cannot be more generous. We have all the excuse why I cannot forgive that person. We have all the excuse why I should be angry. We have all the excuse why I couldn't be kind and compassionate with that person. And everyone feels that way, then, and that is the world that we end up seeing, the world we see. Because everyone expects others to do and not them. So so we're talking about, and is it possible? We talk about good compassion, true compassion, which is unconditional, unbiased, because that is what great compassion, true great compassion described in the Buddhist scriptures. Unconditional, not only unconditional, unbiased. That you have compassion for all sentient beings. Is this possible? Sometimes, and again, from Buddhist point of view, it's absolutely possible. Especially from the Mahayana point of view, absolutely possible, because we all have Buddha nature, what we call Tathagata Garbha, or Buddha nature. And that means, fundamentally, our mind is, even though our mind is diluted at the moment, polluted, contaminated by those selfish attitude, anger, attachment, jealousy, and so forth. But the fundamental nature of our mind is not diluted in its nature. All these delusions are temporary, like the clouds, temporary. The true nature of our mind is like that blue sky. So the cloud is temporary, it comes and obscure, but it doesn't obscure in its nature. And so that when conditions change, the clouds are gone and you can see the unobscure, pure blue sky mind. That is the nature of the mind. Because of that, therefore, the delusions are temporary, the fundamental nature of the mind is undiluted, unpolluted in its nature, and then there is the antidote to overcome those delusions, and therefore, they can be overcome. Therefore, selfish attitude can be overcome. Therefore, anger can be overcome. Therefore, compassion, unconditional, unbiased compassion can be developed. Actually, it is the very, our nature is altruistic. I saw one article, and also I heard from someone who have also, done little more study in that. You know, they have done some research to find what is the nature of, human beings, basic human nature. And according to that finding, the basic human nature is altruistic. And they did that research especially with the younger children because they are more closer to their basic nature. As we grow, then we become more and more distant from our basic nature by the external conditions, you know. Due to the external conditions, informations, we started to hear those people are bad, these people are bad, this is good, this is bad. So that then it started to block our mind from our basic nature. So, but the children who are less exposed to all of that, they are more closer to the basic nature. And they did that research especially below 2 years children. And even with the children who are 6 months, who cannot speak, and with the using an image, and how they respond. I remember there was a one where they used one image of, one children trying to push something and struggling, and that two others children helping that child to push, and show that pictures or the movie and how the 6 month child responds, you know. And then they show a children bullying another children and how they respond. And with all this research, then they see the children, they are much more happy when they see another children helping the other children. They feel very sad when someone is bullying someone else. Even they don't know the language, even they have not been taught all of that, but that is because that is basic how they feel, and so they see that. And in relation to that same research, they also did research with chimpanzee, a monkey, because chimpanzee monkeys are more closer to human beings, so that, and they did with the experiment with the two monkeys, caged together, not together, close to each other, where they can see each other. And they feed both of them, and after some time, they stop feeding the others, feed only one, and how that monkey responds. And the monkey responds with not being happy. Is happy when both of them are fed. But when one of them is fed and the other is not being fed, then he is not so happy. So anyway, that is part of the experiment and research they do. According to that research, that is also their finding was the human basic nature was altruistic, compassion, And if that is our basic nature, of course, from Buddhist point of view, we say we have this, Buddha nature, Tathagata Kalpa, and so definitely, and altruist. But even from scientifically, according to those research, it come to more or less similar. And because if our basic nature is that altruistic, then of course, such unconditional, unbiased compassion is absolutely possible to cultivate, and to be able to, at the moment, is easy for us to cultivate compassion for our loved ones. Okay? It's a little bit more challenging to have compassion for strangers. It's extremely challenging to have compassion for our enemies, whom we dislike, whom we don't agree, especially those who have harmed you or your families. But again, through training, if someone really truly trained and put effort, they can also feel compassion, not only for the loved one, even for those who harm you. And there are many examples of that throughout the histories and among the great practitioners. There is a story of one, His Holiness Dalai Lama often shared that, of one monk. He was imprisoned 20 years and tortured, very badly. And after 20 years, he was released, and somehow he was able to escape and came to India, escaped to India and met Dalai Lama, And then, His own Dalai Lama said, they were having some casual conversation one day, and His Holiness asked about his experience in prisons. And the monk said, there were a couple of dangers of losing. And Dalai Lama said he thought, maybe losing his life. Maybe he's talking about there are a couple of dangers of losing his life because during those 20 years he was tortured so badly. And what kind of danger do you face? He asked. And the monk said, there are a couple of moments when he almost lost compassion for the person who tortured him, those who tortured him. So that was in those 20 years. Someone who tortured him continuously, not just one time, for 20 years. There are few who ever are those, guards in prison or whatever. Even in those cases, he was able to keep compassion for them, And there are a couple of moments when he almost lost compassion. That was. So imagine someone who is torturing you all the time and still to be able to have compassion. So what does that show? That shows the possibility if you really practice, if someone really practice, they can actually really feel compassion for even those who harms you. Not only the loved ones, but even your enemy, or even those who harms you, you can still feel compassion for them. It just shows that it's possible. That monks was able to do that. It's not saying every monk has same success like him. There are some monks who are upset and angry and, who couldn't have compassion. But that monk and many other great masters who were also imprisoned, and also they don't have any bitter feelings, any anger, instead compassion, including, as His Holiness often says, he feel more compassion for them. And that is what the Buddha's Bodhisattvas, feel more compassion to the enemy more than the loved ones, because they are creating so much negative karma, because they are harmful actions. Because of their harmful action, because they are creating so much negative karma, so they feel more compassion for them. Also, when someone is being very mean and cruel and unkind, that means that person is experiencing a lot of suffering and pain. When people are not suffering and not pain, and when they are happy in their life, they are harmless. And that is not only human beings, it's the same with animals. if you watch the animals, they are more aggressive when they are fearful. When they are fearful, then they are not happy. Their mind is not peaceful, calm. When they are fearful, or when they are going through some, pain and suffering, maybe they have been abused, and so every time and because of that, fear and other things, and so in those cases they are more aggressive. Or when they are starving, you know, because the suffering of starving, then they will attack the other animals. When they are not starving, tiger and deer will play. I've seen some videos, and also in natural, in some of those documentaries in natural, they don't attack, they just sleep there. But when they are hungry, then that is when they have the suffering of the hunger. And that is where, and same with human beings, when people are very happy and they don't have much problem, they don't intentionally hurt and harm others so much. But when they are dealing with so much pain themselves and issue with themselves, challenges, and they don't know how to, and they are overwhelmed, then that is when they are more likely to hurt and harm others. So from that also, what you understand, when someone is being cruel, mean, unkind, oh, that person must be suffering a lot. It's a sign that suffering, that person is suffering a lot. Through that, you can then, because that person is suffering so much, then you can feel compassion. You don't agree with that actions because it's harmful action, but you feel compassion for that person. And if you feel compassion for that person, and if you don't have to get angry and upset, you don't have to suffer because of your anger. You don't have to suffer because of your anger. Instead, with your compassion, you are able to keep your mind peaceful and calm. And so that is, yeah, the key. The key to find peaceful mind, calm mind, happy mind is to cultivate true love, compassion. One of the key is to cultivate true love, compassion. And in training, in our practice meditation training, we have to emphasize more on our enemy, more on those people who are not kind, compassionate. Because loved ones, you don't have to train, you just feel. You feel before even you started meditating. Your loved one, when they are in distress, when they are having problems, you feel for them, didn't you? Did you have to meditate? No, even people who doesn't meditate, even people who doesn't, when their loved ones, close, near ones, when they are in pain, suffering, they feel for them. They feel compassion for them. Maybe attachment mixed, but they feel for them, even without training, practice. And as I was saying, even the animal can feel that sometimes. So the point is not to that loved one, but to be able to feel compassion for those who are unkind and mean, and that is where, that if you can feel compassion for them instead of anger, then that is a sign that our practice and meditations, we have made progress in terms of compassion. Because that doesn't come to everyone naturally. That doesn't come, And so that is where also we need to work on, trying to really let go of anger and resentments and hateful feelings towards those who harms and hurt us, our families, friends, or any other sentient beings, and instead to be able to feel compassion. If we can do that, then for sure is a sign of our good practice, progress of our good practice, So I think I talk too much. So I will, the time is, so I will take a couple of questions, if anyone has questions. Does anyone have any questions, please? Yes, please. Yeah.
When you start on this journey, you feel overwhelmed when you're trying to be compassionate to everyone and every situation. Have you any advice for us taking baby steps?
Yeah. There are a couple of things that we can, when we try to practice compassion, first we have to understand what the compassion is. It's a state of mind we talk about. Okay? And sometimes it is overwhelming, physically tiring, and because we, as an ordinary human being, we are limitation in our physical, how much we can do, how much we cannot do, how much. And so while sometimes you feel if your body needs rest, then it is important to take a rest. If sometimes our body and the mind is wearing down, sometimes we need to rest and refresh. Otherwise we get burned out, and sometimes we collapse both physically, emotionally, sometimes one of them, and we burn out, and then once you burn out, then you don't want to help anymore. You're done with that. Sometimes people doesn't want to be even close to that complex or that building that they used to work. Whether it's a center, whether it's a non-profit organization or whatever, they are so burned out so badly. Physically, even they feel almost sick just by seeing those, and that is not a good way. It's not a good outcome. So sometimes we have to understand when we need to kind of take the break so we don't become that. So we can continue to give more longer, and that's one thing, listening to our own body, mind, and recognizing that. And we have to be honest. Sometimes it can be an excuse for us not to again do things. So those are the things that we have to be more mindful and more honest and really understanding our own body and mind. That is one thing. And while even if you cannot be there, still you can have compassion. Compassion doesn't mean physically you have to be everywhere. You can still feel compassion for all over the world, the people who are suffering due to different conditions. That doesn't mean you have to be physically there to solve their problem or to, but still cultivating the mind to understand their pain and suffering and to send prayers, meditations, whatever, different ways, and there wherever we can physically, we try to do that. That is one thing, so not to overdo when our body and mind cannot take it. I think that is one thing. The feeling that I have to do, because I have to practice compassion, I have to give, and therefore not listening to your body or your mind, and then we burn out and started to feel negative about whole things. And resentment and all things can happen, So that is not healthy. So we want to make sure that we don't end up in being that. And so that is being more Mainly listening, understanding and listening to your own body and mind. That is one thing. Second thing, one of the advice Lama Tsongkhapa gave is not to be overwhelmed by the suffering of others when we practice the compassion, is to meditate on emptiness, the emptiness of the suffering sentient beings and the suffering itself. And you yourself who has been overwhelmed by that. So meditating on that emptiness can help to reduce being overwhelmed by that. But then again, when we meditate too much on emptiness and when you start to feel there's no suffering sentient beings, then again you have to focus on the compassion. So it is balancing those two things. If you are becoming overwhelmed because you are constantly feeling the pain of the other sentient beings, then meditating on emptiness of that can help. Yeah. Any others? Or ready to go in bed? I think that seems what. Yes, please.
A bit on what Anne was saying
Mm-hmm.
about baby steps, because like tonight, well, just before I came here, I went to the shopping centre and I was walking through the shopping centre, and I normally just walk in a straight line and not take notice of too many people around me, but lately I've been looking at all the people around me and taking note of what that we're more like trying to understand that they have the same feelings as I have, and that they're all going the same way, which is to death. We all have that same experience, but just understanding that, trying to grasp the enormity of all these people, and trying to feel that compassion, but at the same time feeling somewhat overwhelmed by it all.
Mm-hmm.
Because the more I look and see and feel, the more kind of overwhelming it becomes. That's not a bad thing.
Yeah.
It's like it's a big thing.
Yes.
But numberless sentient beings.
Yes. I think as long as it doesn't overwhelm and lead into that, definitely. That was one of the caution, like in Shantideva, God's the both a way of life. Of course, it is kind of in that is is a discussion between your two minds. Your selfish mind and non-selfish mind. Is so then your selfish mind is, or if I meditate on suffering of all sentient beings, wouldn't I be overwhelmed by all the sufferings? Wouldn't the suffering increase? I'm already dealing with my own pain and suffering in the samsara, and then to think of each and every sentient being's suffering and problem, wouldn't that be too overwhelming, and wouldn't that be too much then that you can deal, and then in that, in answering that with your questions, is again, two level of answer. One is, it wouldn't be overwhelming. Of course, we talk about if you have the wisdom of understanding emptiness, that will help you not overwhelm. But also, when we have true compassion, not the emotional compassion, where emotional compassion can be overwhelming, okay? But the true compassion that is not just emotional, but that you train your mind based on understanding, that kind of training, when you do that training, if you develop bodhicitta based on that training, you will not be overwhelmed, because through that training, you cultivate more courage and more confidence, because in that kind of training, you train to take willingly to take other sufferings, and to be, for example, as in Lama Chopa, as it says, even if I have to remain in the hell realms, even for one sentient being, to help one sentient, eon in eons, may I never lose my compassions. May I perfect the practice of joyous effort in that. So that is kind of Bodhisattva's training when they are trying to develop compassion, bodhicitta mind. You know, the other one, Shandeva's was, as long as sentient beings remain, as long as space remains, as sentient may I too remain to dispel the misery of all sentient beings. So those are kind of the training, you know, the willingness to be there as long as it takes, no matter how many eons it takes, no matter how many suffering it. So when you train your mind and you're mentally building up your strength, mentally building your courage, mentally building up your confidence, and when you have built so much of that, and based on that, when you develop compassion, then that doesn't become overwhelming, you know. Then you develop such, like, example I give is like, you know, in the ocean, depth in the bottom of the oceans, even the outside there might be big waves and all of that, but in the bottom of the oceans there's calmness. That wave cannot disturb that calmness there. In the same way, you know, when someone has developed such true compassion based on such training, there's that stillness in the depth. And because that stillness on the depth, like the surface waves, you feel the compassion, you feel the suffering of others. You feel, you understand, you feel the sufferings of others, but it doesn't destroy that calmness on the depth. And so therefore it doesn't become overwhelming. And that's strength from the very bottom, deep from the strength comes because you have trained yourself over the years through such meditation training to develop that mental strength with courage, confidence, and that. And so that will be not overwhelming, okay? So, and then in that Shantideva's answer also, another way of looking, even there's more suffering is worthwhile because in the past we have gone through all the suffering just to fulfill our selfish attitude. Now to fulfill the well-being of all sentient beings, if you need to go through little suffering, is worthwhile for a big cause. So therefore, that is another attitude one can have. And so yes, that's all. Yes, please. That will be the last question for today. Yes. No, you, Pauline. Yeah. Uh-huh.
And just I was paying, and because I had my two sticks, so I went on side, and a woman was queuing up with a big trolley, and she and the cashier attending to one at the trolley, and she was behind, and I walked off because he had to the door, and she followed me without paying. Big trolley full. And I could have said to the person, one of the workers, she didn't pay. But I could not bring myself to do that. So after she had gone quite far, I said to the cashier, that woman didn't pay. But it was too late, they couldn't catch her. How many people would have gone and Dr. If the full trolley, she was about 40 years old. She looked quite tired. So maybe she needed that trolley.
Yeah.
She was in the queue, but because I walked out, she
Uh-huh.
followed.
Mm-hmm. Maybe she thought you didn't pay, and so I can also feel. No, I'm joking. So she thought I can blame her if yeah. Oh, she was just going through without paying. No, I'm just joking. Yeah.
Hold the, or would you just let her go with the flow? How many would bring management? It happens all the time. That's what happened to me. The security and then that's what the woman say. Cannot touch them. You cannot let him know. Even if it's recorded on the camera. Yes. They can't. It's just the rules at the moment. Happened to me. What do you mean by they can't do it? Well, they're not allowed to prosecute them. They can pull them to one side and get the police. But police, because it happens so much now, they can't touch these people. I spoke to a woman in Big W. Why? They don't put any electrical things out of packets because people just take them away. So now they just take the whole box. Very common. Yeah, that's right. I feel compassion for the security guards. You know, they argue with them. It's only the police that can handle. But then what do they do?
I guess it's a question about compassion.
Yeah.
Compassion at all.
So the thief came to your house and took your thing and walked off with it. What would you do?
I'd stay back because I let them have it because they carry knives. All these people,
Yeah, but let's say they're not carrying a knife. They just go in there and steal your pot plant and walked off. Or you had a big bunch of flowers.
Yeah, but I live on my own body.
So you will not.
You were back on the topic.
Practice. Break your house tomorrow.
But the thing is, I just think, well, I need it from me.
I'll go help you myself to you.
Okay, so
So that compassion to let them go.
yeah, those are little kind of tricky. From one point of view, there is a compassion part for sure. From another point of view, yeah, but then is their problem, you know. If they create negative karma, it's their problems. They experience the result that themselves.
So is there negative karma? For me, I go and get them into trouble because I told somebody.
No, it depends on your motivations, you know. Yeah, your motivation is not to harm them, help the others. So it depends the motivation. It depends on the motivations. Yeah. Page number 8. Dedications. We do just 2 of them. First 2 today. Gewa di nyudo da lama sangye dukyo ne doa chi kyama lue pa te sala kwe pa sho chanjo semjo rinpo che ma ke pa na ke kyo chi gewa nyamba me pa yang kong le kong do ke wa sho Thank you. Thank you. Good night. Thank you.